Have you ever pondered whether being intelligent is truly a blessing or a disguised burden? Imagine seeing everything with absolute clarity in a world where most prefer the comforting fog of ignorance. It sounds like a superpower, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this ability, which everyone is supposed to desire, could be the path to overwhelming solitude and a pain that no one else can understand? Being intelligent is like having eyes in a world of the blind. At first, it's fascinating. You notice details that no one else sees, decipher patterns, solve problems. But over time, you start to notice something troubling. The same eyes that reveal hidden beauties also show you deep abysses that others simply ignore. It's like intelligence is a lighthouse illuminating life's storms. And who would want to carry this light knowing it only reveals more storms? The more you understand, the more you realize the void and suffering surrounding you. While others dance without a care, you're the only one who knows the party is ending, and that gradually isolates you. Being different, being someone who sees beyond, is to bear the weight of not being understood. And it's not just that. The expectations others place on you, you're so smart you must know what to do, can be as suffocating as the solitude itself. But why does this clarity, which should be a gift, often feel like a curse? Because living in a world that doesn't share the same vision is heartbreaking. Think about your experiences. How many times have you seen something that no one else noticed? How many times have you tried to warn others about something they considered irrelevant, only to be ignored or worse, ridiculed? And that's where the real dilemma begins. Being intelligent puts you in a position where not only do you see more, but you feel more. You bear the burden of being aware of consequences before they occur, of understanding what's hidden behind words, of capturing the anguish in looks that others ignore. It's not just a burden, it's a responsibility you never asked for. But there's something even more intriguing. Do people truly appreciate intelligence, or do they prefer the comfortable ignorance of those who just go with the flow? Schopenhauer had a provocative answer. He believed that superior intelligence did not bring happiness, but rather awareness. And awareness, my friend, is not good. It doesn't allow you to pretend everything is fine. It drags you into existential questions that few dare to face. And here's a point to ponder. Have you ever felt that the more you learned or understood, the more disconnected you became from the people around you? It's a cruel paradox. Intelligence should bring us closer, but it often drives us apart because people don't want to be challenged. They don't want you to question their certainties or reveal the flaws in their logic. And inevitably, this creates a chasm between you and the rest of the world. And it's in this abyss that you find yourself alone. While others live in relative peace, you face the frustration of seeing what no one else notices. It's like being the only one to realize the bridge is about to collapse, but no one wants to hear it. They're too busy enjoying the crossing to heed your warnings. And it doesn't stop there. There are also expectations. The expectations. They come from everywhere. Family, friends, colleagues. You're so intelligent, you'll surely stand out, they say. But what no one understands is that intelligence doesn't solve everything. It doesn't protect you from grief, insecurities, or doubts. In fact, it amplifies all of that because, contrary to popular belief, intelligence is not a magic solution. It doesn't give you ready-made answers, but fills you with questions. Questions that make you question everything. Life, purpose, why we are here. And while others find comfort in simple answers, you find yourself trapped in a labyrinth of uncertainty. So, maybe the problem isn't what you can do with your intelligence, but what it does to you. It transforms you, challenges you, pushes you into uncharted territories of the mind and soul, and often puts you in a position of misunderstanding. Have you ever thought about why geniuses are often perceived as eccentric, isolated, or even sad? Think of characters like Nikola Tesla or Vincent van Gogh. It wasn't their minds that made them lonely. It was the world around them that couldn't keep up with their ideas, that rejected them because it was easier to ignore them than to try to understand them. But what about you? Are you doomed to the same fate? Is the only way out to learn to bear this weight alone? Or is there a way to turn your intelligence into something that not only illuminates but also connects? The answer to this question lies in the next step of this journey. But before we get there, I must ask you, do you really think it's worth being the brightest in the room? Because sometimes shining too brightly doesn't attract admiration, but rather envy, isolation, and ultimately the feeling of not belonging anywhere. And this brings us to a crucial point. Is it possible to be intelligent and at the same time avoid the pitfalls that come with it? Is there a strategy to use your mind so that it doesn't consume you? The answer might lie in an unexpected place, a lesson that Schopenhauer discovered not in moments of glory, but in the darkest hours of his life. And believe me, what follows could completely change your perspective on intelligence and, more importantly, what to do with it. If this reflection makes you uncomfortable, wait to discover how true strength might reside in something no one expects. What would you do if you knew that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all? If being intelligent is a burden, as we've seen, the inevitable question is there a way out? Schopenhauer, despite all his insight, found a disconcerting answer. It's not about being less intelligent, but appearing less intelligent. The idea seems contradictory at first glance. After all, in a world where we are constantly pushed to stand out, why would anyone deliberately hide their light? Wouldn't that be like having a powerful tool and choosing not to use it? But Schopenhauer had solid reasons for this. He realized early on that by trying to show all his genius, he often found himself isolated, the target of envy and misunderstanding. So, he adopted an approach that defied norms. Let others underestimate him. This strategy, which may seem like a step backward, is actually a brilliant way to approach the complexity of human relationships. Think of something that happens every day. Have you ever been in a meeting where, even if you knew exactly the solution to a problem, you decided to say nothing? Perhaps you preferred to listen to others, observe, and at the right moment, present the idea more modestly, almost as if it were a casual suggestion. If you've ever done this, congratulations. In a way, you've applied Schopenhauer's principle without realizing it. Pretending to be inferior to what you really are doesn't mean denying your intelligence, but using subtlety as a weapon. The goal is not to appear inferior, but to create a space that allows others to feel comfortable and eventually surprise them with a strategic decision at the right moment. Schopenhauer understood that people who constantly shine can evoke two inevitable emotions: admiration and resentment. The latter is far more dangerous. The lesson from A Mother's Letter, this idea of appearing less began to form in Schopenhauer at the age of 19 when he received a letter from his mother. In the message, she praised his intelligence but reproached him for always trying to stand out. His mother warned him that this need to be the best could ruin his virtues. The young Schopenhauer was deeply affected by her words and realized that despite all his genius, the world around him was not ready to face someone so intense. And it's not hard to relate this to our daily lives. Think about how, in social groups or at work, the person who always corrects others or shows off their knowledge may be regarded with disdain, no matter how brilliant they are. The emotional impact they have on others is discomfort. Now, think of another type of person, someone who, in a debate, listens more than they speak, asks questions that prompt others to think, and when they finally take a stand, presents an idea so simple and elegant that it seems obvious. This person not only earns the respect of the group, but is often considered wise. The difference between these two types of people doesn't lie in intelligence, but in how intelligence is presented. The wisdom of surprise. A classic example of this strategic approach is that of a martial artist. An experienced master never shows all his potential at the beginning of a fight. He studies his opponent, lets him tire out, and at the precise moment, makes a decisive move that ends the fight. The same principle applies to human interactions. By pretending to be less, you disarm others, create an environment of comfort, and when you finally reveal your abilities, you surprise in a powerful way. And this is not just a philosophical theory. Historical figures and leaders throughout the centuries have masterfully adopted this approach. Sun Tzu, the Chinese military strategist, wrote in The Art of War, "All warfare is based on deception. When we are able, we must appear unable. When we are prepared, we must appear unprepared." This lesson applies not only to the battlefield, but also to the daily battles we face in our lives. Imagine a leader who, instead of imposing his authority and intelligence in an obvious way, allows his subordinates to present ideas, to feel heard and valued. This leader, who seemingly gives up space, actually gains the trust of his team. And when he acts or gives an order, he is perceived as wise, strategic, and worthy of respect. The psychology behind pretending to be less. But why does it work so well? The answer lies in a fundamental element of human psychology. People don't like to feel inferior. When you show your abilities in an exaggerated way, even if you don't realize it, you risk giving others a sense of inadequacy or envy. On the other hand, when you allow people to believe they are contributing or in control, they tend to form a more positive emotional connection with you. It's like playing a game where you voluntarily let the other person win. Think of a parent who lets their child beat them in a game of chess. The parent obviously knows they could win, but they understand that the value of this experience lies not in victory, but in what the child feels when they believe they are more intelligent. The same principle applies to human relationships. Sometimes, by giving up a victory or a moment to shine, you gain something far more valuable: the silent and lasting admiration of others. The importance of humility and empathy. Schopenhauer believed that this strategy was not just a social tactic, but also a form of empathy. Pretending to be less is not about deception, but about allowing people to feel comfortable with you. It's an act of conscious humility. Think about how many times you've seen a colleague point out a boss's mistake or correct someone in public. Even if they are right, the person who acts this way generally doesn't earn respect, but rather hostility. In contrast, someone who acts with discretion, who protects others' egos, and presents their ideas subtly gains allies rather than enemies. Applying the strategy in your life. So how can you apply this to your life? The answer lies in small moments. The next time you feel the urge to prove you're right, ask yourself, is this victory worth it? Or can I use this opportunity to build a stronger connection? When you're in conversation, practice listening more and speaking less. Wait for the right moment to make an impact with few but powerful words. And remember, being underestimated is not a weakness, it's a strategic advantage. As Socrates said, "I know that I know nothing." Feigning ignorance or allowing others to underestimate you can be a way to stand out in a manner no one expects. And if we push this reflection further, if this idea resonates with you, share your experiences in the comments. Have you ever pretended to be inferior to achieve something greater? Or do you know someone who masters this art? If this video has made you see intelligence in human relationships in a new way, subscribe to the channel and enjoy the video. It's not just a way to support our work, but also to show that you appreciate reflections that challenge the obvious. After all, true power doesn't lie in being the brightest in the room, but in knowing the right moment to reveal your light. Join us in the next part, where we will explore how to turn others' perceptions into your greatest ally. Don't miss it. Have you ever noticed that in any group, there's one person who talks incessantly, dominating the conversation, and another who remains silent and observant? And have you ever noticed how silence often seems to carry more weight than words? It's no coincidence. There is extraordinary power in subtlety, in the ability to listen before acting, to speak only when necessary. And this power is not just a strategy, but a way to create a lasting impact and earn the respect of others. The philosopher Sun Tzu, herald of the art of war, wrote, "When we are in motion, we appear immobile. When we are strong, we pretend to be weak." It sounds like advice meant for military strategists, but it's actually a rule of life. Often the greatest impact you can have occurs at the moment when no one expects it. It's like that silent person in a meeting who, after long minutes of debate, utters a single sentence, and that precise sentence solves the problem and changes the course of the discussion. But how do you master this art of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent? It's not easy because it goes against our nature. Humans have an almost instinctive need to be heard, to participate, to make their presence known. However, true leaders and the most respected people are not those who talk the most, but those who know how to listen. Silence as a strategy. Gandhi said, "Speak only if what you are going to say is more valuable than silence." This simple phrase carries a profound lesson. In a world saturated with information, where everyone expresses their opinion, those who master silence stand out effortlessly. Because silence, contrary to what many think, is not passivity. It's an active strategy, a space to absorb, analyze, and act with precision. Think of a daily situation. Imagine you're in a heated argument. Your natural reaction might be to defend your point of view, to raise your voice, or even to confront the speaker directly. But what if instead you simply listened? If you waited for everyone to finish speaking and then calmly and serenely presented your vision, the impact would be much greater. Why? Because silence followed by action carries an authority that noise can never match. And there's a psychological reason behind this. When someone is silent, the people around them start to pay more attention. There's a natural curiosity. What is this person thinking? Why aren't they reacting? And when they finally speak, their words are received with greater attention. But here arises an intriguing question. Are we ready to accept silence as a tool of power? Or have we been conditioned to believe that we must fill every moment with words? The benefit of speaking less and observing more. A clear example of this power comes from nature. Think of the lion, the ultimate predator. It is not the fastest nor the strongest in all aspects, but its ability to patiently observe before attacking is what makes it so effective. It waits for the perfect moment, calculates every move, and when it acts, it does so with surgical precision. The same principle applies to us. People who know how to listen and observe have a huge advantage in any situation. While others exhaust themselves trying to prove themselves, they gather information, analyze the environment, and identify opportunities that no one else notices. Think of the great strategists in history. They are not those who made the most noise, but those who waited, observed, and at the opportune moment, acted decisively. And this brings us to a fundamental question. How many opportunities do we miss because we talk too much and listen too little? Is true power about impressing others or understanding them? The wisdom of subtlety in history and daily life. Socrates, with his famous irony, personified this idea. He did not position himself as the wisest, but asked simple questions that led people to question their own certainties. The result? They themselves arrived at the conclusions he wanted, believing they had discovered something on their own. This method, as subtle as it is powerful, not only conveyed knowledge but also created a lasting emotional impact. Now, let's introduce this into our daily lives. Imagine a situation at work where your boss makes an obvious mistake. You have two options: correct them directly, risking creating an uncomfortable situation, or subtly steer the conversation so they realize the mistake themselves. Which of these approaches would yield better results? The second one, without a doubt. And that's where subtlety comes into play as a tool of leadership. It's not just a way to avoid conflicts, but also to create deeper bonds. When you allow others to feel they have reached their own conclusions, you earn their respect without imposing your superiority. Pattern break, the surprise in silence. But here's a surprising fact. Silence can have as much impact as words, but it must also be used wisely. Have you ever met someone who remains silent all the time, and when they finally speak, their words carry no weight? This happens because silence only has power when it is intentional, when it's a choice, not a habit. The secret, therefore, lies not only in when to speak, but how to speak. Your words, even if few, must be meaningful. They must be like precise strikes that hit the target effortlessly. How to apply this philosophy in your life? Do you want to start using the power of subtlety and silence in your everyday life? Here are some simple but transformative practices. Practice active listening. Instead of thinking about what you're going to say next, focus entirely on what the other person is saying. This not only creates a deeper connection, but also gives you more information to act strategically. Pause before responding. Take a few seconds to pause. This shows that you are thinking, and your words will carry more weight. Be precise when you speak. Choose your words carefully. Less is more, especially when your sentences are well thought out. And remember, silence is not a sign of weakness, but of confidence. It takes courage to remain silent in a world that values noise. If this reflection has made you see silence and subtlety in a new way, share in the comments how you can apply this to your life. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of discovery, and don't forget to like the video. By doing so, you not only support this content, but show that you are part of a group that values reflection and true impact. And remember, the next part of this series will explore how to turn the respect gained through subtlety into lasting power. Don't miss it, because sometimes it's what you don't say that holds the real strength. See you there. Have you ever thought about how many conflicts could be avoided if we paid more attention to the words we choose? We live in a world where everyone silently carries their insecurities, fears, and vulnerabilities, and often a simple phrase can be enough to hurt or comfort someone. Knowing how to manage this is not just a matter of kindness, it's a strategic skill that can transform your relationships. Schopenhauer, with his keen insight into human behavior, advocated something essential. True power does not lie in revealing others' weaknesses, but in protecting them. By preserving others' egos, you not only avoid unnecessary conflicts, but also gain the trust and respect of those around you. But why is this so important? Because the ego is often the foundation of self-esteem. When you correct someone publicly, no matter how right you are, you actually put that person in a vulnerable position. And instinctively, they will defend themselves instead of absorbing your critique. They will fight against it. That's why arguments rarely change opinions. They usually attack the ego directly, leading people to cling even more tightly to their beliefs. A story of strategy and empathy. To illustrate the power of protecting others' egos, let's go back in time to the reign of Queen Elizabeth I of England. Elizabeth was a brilliant queen, but she knew that her position as a woman on the throne was constantly questioned. One day, one of her advisors attempted to challenge her publicly during a meeting. He corrected her openly and directly, which for many leaders would be unforgivable. But Elizabeth, instead of responding with anger or authority, looked at him calmly and said, "Perhaps you are right. Let's think about this together." By using these words, she not only preserved the dignity of her advisor, but also subtly reinforced her authority. In the end, her decision prevailed, but the advisor left the meeting feeling heard and, more importantly, respected. This approach was not just a matter of good manners, it was a sophisticated political strategy. By protecting the egos of her allies and even her adversaries, Elizabeth consolidated her position as a leader without alienating those around her. Now, think about how this applies to your daily life. How many times have you seen someone being abruptly corrected at work or during an informal conversation? And how did it affect the dynamics of that moment? Perhaps the person corrected became defensive or even emotionally withdrawn. It's a common mistake, but it can be avoided with a dose of empathy. The dilemma of balancing care and truth. In a corporate environment, the ability to protect others' egos can make the difference between a collaborative atmosphere and a place full of tension. Imagine you're in a meeting and your boss presents an idea with an obvious error. What would your reaction be? Correct them immediately so the error doesn't become a bigger problem, or find a way to guide the conversation until they realize the mistake themselves? The second option may seem slower, but it is infinitely more effective. By allowing the person to arrive at the conclusion on their own, you preserve your position and maintain the relationship intact. It's like planting an idea instead of forcing it. And it's not just an act of kindness, it's a smart tactic to gain allies rather than enemies. A study from the University of Michigan on leadership dynamics revealed that leaders who publicly or directly correct their subordinates are 30% more likely to face resistance or a drop in team performance. In contrast, those who use constructive and discreet criticism see their productivity increase by 40%. The reason is simple. People work better when they feel respected and valued. Reflecting on the narrative, so far we've talked about the importance of protecting others' egos and the impact it can have on your personal and professional relationships. But now, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember a moment when you were rudely corrected? How did it make you feel? These moments are usually etched in our memories, and that's why it's so important to be aware of how we treat others. Correcting someone may seem like a small act, but depending on your approach, it can have a lasting impact, for better or worse. And here's the real dilemma. How do you reconcile the need to be honest with the importance of protecting others' egos? The answer lies in how you present your truth. Schopenhauer and the wisdom of subtlety. Schopenhauer argued that rather than confronting people directly, it was more effective to guide them to the truth subtly. He compared it to gently opening a door rather than breaking it down. And interestingly, this strategy not only facilitates the acceptance of ideas, but also strengthens the emotional bond between people. For example, imagine you have a friend who is making poor decisions in their personal life. Instead of saying, "You're wrong and this will end badly," you might try something like, "I understand why you're doing this. I've thought the same way before, but can I share something I've learned?" This approach, which places the person in a position of choice rather than imposition, is much more effective. And here's the secret. Protecting others' egos is not about hiding the truth, but presenting it in a way that can be heard. What does this say about us? But why is it so difficult? Because on some level, we all want to be heard and respected. When we correct someone, it's often more about asserting our position than genuinely helping. It's a reflection of our own ego-seeking validation. Therefore, protecting others' egos requires something rare: self-awareness. It requires recognizing your own intentions and setting them aside for a greater goal. If you've made it this far, if you've already realized that protecting others' egos is not a sign of weakness, but of strength, it's the ability to balance honesty with empathy, truth with respect, and most importantly, it's a way to create deeper and more authentic connections. Now, I want to invite you, think of someone in your life who could benefit from this approach, perhaps a colleague, a friend, or even a family member. Try applying what we've discussed today. Instead of correcting directly, guide the person to the conclusion themselves. Notice how this transforms the dynamic between you. And of course, if this reflection seems relevant to you, subscribe to the channel and like this video. By doing so, you not only support this content, but also join a community that values personal growth and human relationships. In the next part, we will explore how this skill of empathy and protection can be used to create authentic and lasting respect. Are you ready to take the next step? Then see you there. And remember, true wisdom doesn't lie in what you know, but in what you choose to share. You've made it this far, which already says a lot about you. Perhaps at some point in this journey, you identified with the weight of intelligence, the strategy of appearing less, the power of silence, or the challenge of protecting others' egos. But now it's time to connect all these reflections, because the real question is not just understanding these ideas, but knowing how to use them to build a more balanced, more connected, and above all, more meaningful life. The wisdom of being less to be more. Think about what it means to be discreet in a world that teaches us to shine all the time. Being discreet seems almost like an act of rebellion, but the truth is that discretion is not about dimming your light, but knowing how to use it at the right moment. It's like carrying a lit candle in a storm. You don't expose it to every passing wind, but protect it carefully until you find the ideal place to light it. Great leaders, thinkers, and strategists throughout history have understood this well. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching said that the true sage wears simple clothes but carries a jewel in his heart. The message is clear. You don't need to show everything you know to have an impact. In fact, the more modest you appear, the more powerful your actions become. And here's the irony. When you learn to be discreet, to let others underestimate you, and to create deep connections with empathy, something curious happens. Not only do you gain respect, but you also free yourself from the need to be constantly validated. After all, true power doesn't lie in being recognized by everyone, but in being recognized by those who truly matter. Connection as an answer to isolation. Do you remember when we talked about the weight of intelligence, how seeing beyond can be lonely? It's a real dilemma, but what may not have been as clear until now is that the solution to this loneliness is not to abandon your vision, but to use it to connect on a deeper level. This is where empathy comes in, the art of protecting others' egos and creating moments of impact with subtlety. Because in the end, what people desire most, more than admiration, more than success, is to feel understood. If you can look beyond someone's words, understand their unspoken pains, their masked insecurities, and respond with generosity, you create a kind of connection that transcends the obvious. And this connection not only fills the void of loneliness, but also gives meaning to what you know and who you are. A story to ponder. Imagine a man named Elias. He was known in his town as the most brilliant strategist, a master at solving problems no one else could. But curiously, Elias lived alone, isolated. People admired him, but kept their distance. They said, "He's brilliant, but he's impossible to communicate with." One day, Elias was called to resolve a conflict in a neighboring village. Two brothers were fighting over an inheritance, and no one could convince them to reach an agreement. Elias patiently listened to both sides, but instead of offering an immediate solution, he did something unexpected. He shared the story of his own life, recounting how, as a young man, he had lost a brother in a similar dispute. The brothers, touched by his vulnerability, began to see the conflict differently. It wasn't Elias's intelligence that resolved the situation, but his ability to connect, to show that he understood what they were going through. Ultimately, the brothers reached an agreement, and Elias returned home. But something had changed. He realized that his true strength lay not only in his mind, but also in his heart. This story, whether fictional or not, reflects a universal truth. Knowledge impresses, but empathy transforms. Why is all this important? We are constantly seeking ways to be more effective, more respected, more admired. But deep down, what truly matters is not how much we can impress others, but how much we can touch their lives. Intelligence without connection is like a locked library full of wisdom, but with no one to access it. On the other hand, when you learn to use your intelligence to build bridges rather than walls, you discover something far more valuable than recognition. You find purpose. The journey continues. So, how can we tie all this together? What can we take from this reflection into our own lives? Here are some ideas to get started. 1. Cultivate strategic silence. You don't need to say everything. Save your best ideas for the right moments. 2. Practice active empathy. When someone speaks, truly listen. Try to understand what lies beyond their words. 3. Protect others' egos. Remember that people are more open to the truth when they feel respected. 4. Be vulnerable when necessary. Don't be afraid to share your own stories. They might be the bridge you need. 5. Remember the true strength. It's not about being the brightest in the room, but about being the one who transforms the environment with your presence, even if that transformation begins in silence. Now, it's your turn. What will you do with these reflections? I invite you to take a practical step. Think of a relationship or situation in your life where you can apply what you've learned here. It could be at work, with a friend, or even with a family member. Try listening more, speaking less, and protecting the other person's ego. Then come back here and tell me how it went. If this video has brought you value, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's not just a way to support our work, but also to show that you are a part of a community that values self-awareness, empathy, and real relationships. And don't stop there. The next content will explore how these skills can be used to tackle even greater challenges. Challenges that require not only intelligence, but also courage and resilience. Thank you for making it this far. You are part of something special, something bigger. See you in the next video. Until then, continue to find a balance between showing your light and walking in the shadows when necessary.